been involved in crowdfunding the project as well. And I'm interested whether they go on to become contributors as part of the crowdsourcing, or they feel they've kind of already made their contribution and they let it roll. And then I also have a second question around, you seem to suggest that the more input contributors have towards projects, the more engaged they feel. And I wonder, is there scope for the kind of model to shift, where it is the contributors driving and defining the project, and really you as researchers are kind of just providing some expertise where necessary?
Sure. Okay, I'll start with the second question. Yes, I mean, I would say that there are two main groups. So the ones who are very involved in the crowdsourcing tend to be also very active on the forum, suggest things they would like to see happening on the website or they would like to be doing, and being responsive to that is key to maintain them engaged. So after being responsive, we regained people who were very involved but had just sort of stopped contributing because they were feeling they wanted to be, in their words, part of the team. And they just didn't want to do these tasks only. But they kept on doing them. So there is a group who's keen about the contributory participation and also wants to be more engaged with, for example, the 3D modeling. However, I mean, I should also point out that when it comes to choosing the projects, even these more involved collaborators tend to choose based on the kind of activity that they feel more comfortable with. So those who are very involved would try all the kinds that you propose, but if they prefer crowdsourced transcription, they'll sort of stick to that mainly. Or they prefer working with images, they tend to prefer those applications mainly. So there is the key determinant there is the feel, the kind of activity that they like, the kind of making, digital making that they prefer to go for. Then there is another group, let's call it a group of people who sort of do a few tasks and then you sort of lose them. They just try it out. And for them, I don't know if we can talk about engagement or just, I mean, it's difficult to really see what they get out of it because, for example, even trying a task could be a way of sort of finding out more about a collection and then visiting, for example. And that's a form of learning in terms of changing behavior. Or instead, they could just, not like it and go off and do something else. So the second part of your question was if they propose something as well and we would just enable it, so like a hosted model. And that's something we wanted to do from the very beginning, actually. But the point is that it all starts to go on and do these kinds of co-design. You have to build first a structured kind of engagement so that they sort of know what the model is, a group is created, they get familiar with how a project is developed, and then they start suggesting things, but it's a very, very slow process. I don't even think we're there yet in terms of doing it. It's just, we thought it would be possible in a year and a half. I don't think we're still ready for it. It's still, yeah.
We have quite a lot of people approach us.
Yeah, but,
we do have a lot of people approach us.
But from institutions.
Not always. I've had also just people who have small historical projects and they've heard about the platform from somewhere. More recently, I would say, than previously. So we do get on either social media or sometimes just through connections, meeting people where more and more people are saying they're interested in trying to develop something.
But they're not from the contributors to the crowdsourcing.
Not necessarily, no. So it's sort of, yeah, unfortunately it hasn't been quite to that level, but
like
maybe over
there
time.
are maybe groups, like institutions or groups who are out there, but our crowdsourcing people, like the people who contribute to the crowdsourcing, contribute the tasks, and they do the 3D modeling and the consolidation, but don't just say, why don't we do this with my local museum, for example. That hasn't quite happened yet. Yeah.
and the first question was the one about the crowdfunders. So thank you for that one. And the other one was about the crowdfunders and whether they continue to... You might not know that.
Crowdfunding?
So, with the crowdfunders, those were individual, they were for individual projects. Yeah, so for the crowdfunding, those were sort of individual archaeological projects that were put forward by other groups. So one was, for instance, there's a group called the Thames Discovery Program that's connected to the Museum of London, and there was a few other community groups. So in a sense, they were kind of connecting to a slightly different crowd than the core group of Micropasts contributors. I don't know. Yeah, it was kind of completely separate. There wasn't. Did you have any contributors that went across both? Do you know? Yeah, so it was essentially, they were almost, and those were being supported by the groups creating the crowdfunding. So they were actually in charge of kind of getting in touch with the community members and stuff. We weren't promoting those to the same extent as our core kind of activities.
Yeah, that was also hard when it came, because we had some projects that we started with, as Jen was mentioning, and then we had these open calls. So anyone who had a project that was involved in a community, any researcher or a community working with like a university or museum researchers could approach us to fund aspects that wouldn't involve excavation, because we wanted to push sort of the kind of work that is more difficult to fund, like surveys or artifact studies, post-excavation. But there we found it was very difficult to for people to really come up with a generally co-produced project that had been designed by the community together with the researcher. So, but as a whole, I mean, as Jen was saying, our crowdfunding experiment was smaller than the crowdsourcing one. Just something we tried doing, but work less with.
Hi. I had one doubt that is related to the crowdfunding, and then I have another question which is to all of you. So just to continue with the crowdfunding part, to me wasn't clear if the campaigns were limited in time, like they were for some set of days, or if they were like ongoing processes. Just that clarification.
They started being, well, we encouraged 30 days, because that's what was found to be advisable based on experience, mainly drawn from reward-based crowdfunding, so platforms like Kickstarter. But they actually prefer to go with a 60 days period. But at the end of those 60 days, none of them had reached the goal. Actually, we had this model basically. So the projects had to be designed and if funded would be undertaken collaboratively by mixed teams. They could not involve excavation. They had to be about research. So not like a public engagement project or, you know, an educational activity, doing a documentary. Like those could be embedded, could be part of it, but there had to be a research aim. And they could ask from 500 up to £5,000. And that was also based on some data that there's like an array. I don't remember exactly the numbers, but it's between 3,000 and 5,000, something like that, for the average amount of money you can raise through donation-based or reward-based crowdfunding. At the end of the 60 days, none of them had reached the funding, and they just prolonged the period. And after a few months, one of the projects got enough to launch. The problems were, one, yes, as Jennifer said, you can't push a crowdfunding campaign as well externally. You have to sort of be, because it starts from the network that propose it. And the academics behind it, for different reasons, weren't perhaps pushing it as much. And the other thing is that the communities were often archaeological or historical societies. And there was also a digital divide sort of question, because in Britain they've been surveyed and there is an average age of 55, 55 as an average. And a lot of members wanted to give money, for example, but they didn't trust the platform. And this is like qualitative feedback that we got. So the mechanism didn't quite work with that. But yeah, I mean, we sort of learned this, but didn't take it forward because we accepted we were more interested in like the collaborative research side, I guess.
Thanks. And if I may do another question for the three of you, I wanted to explore a little bit more on the specific licensing that each project is using, and if the digitization of different items use different layers of open source free licenses, like allowing for-profit uses or derivative work, or if you use just one kind of different licenses.
So, the British Library likes to slap copyright British Library on everything they can, but things are changing. And so I was explaining, we've had different crowdsourcing activities. So the one big one was the Flickr 1 million images. And that one came about because we had worked with Microsoft when they were competing with Google back in the day. And so we went with them because they had a better contract that was slightly less evil for taking our books and digitizing them and then giving us access to the resulting images. So they were competing. They did 68,000 books for us, and then they said, we don't care, forget it, Google is going to win this battle, we're out. And they gave us all the images and all the books back and said, you can do whatever you want with them. So the books were in the public domain, so they're 19th century books. And they were no longer under this contractual embargo. So still at that point, though, we could have slapped, because the UK law is a little different than like a lot of places, so we could have still said that that was our intellectual property and put a British Library copyright thing on it. But we didn't. And so we said, these are public domain, we're going to let them out into the world. You can do whatever you want with them. And for that crowdsourcing activity where people were tagging them and they're out in the world, and you can go on Flickr right now, you can use any of those images any way you want. And now we're trying to capture, what is the economic growth and research growth that's come out of this? Because you have institutions using it for, computer research, computer vision research on, testing their algorithms with this stuff. And then, digital humanities, computational linguistics, using all of these image files in this free collection of books. And so we did the same with the catalog, the cards, but those are less glossy. They're not very compelling unless you're a librarian, and maybe not even then. So that's a different thing. So those are free as well. You can do whatever you want with them, and I welcome anyone to do something very cool with them. And through our BL Labs, you could win an award if you get some cash if you do something cool with them. And again, there might be a way of programmatically looking at those index cards and doing it without the crowd, but we don't actually think that's true. But anyway, so it's different for different things. There's still a problem at the library where government funding is being cut, so we have to make up the difference, and the old school way of valuing that is, a movie studio will pay tens of thousands for a pretty picture of a map to include in their movie. So where do we make up the difference? And so those conversations are ongoing at the library. But for digital research, it has to be open and free. So we're kind of building the case studies to push that message and change how we define value from British Library. So we're actually contributing to the economic growth of the country and other places. That is where we should say we're getting value, not that we sold a couple of images for a couple thousand or whatever. So that was long-winded. Sorry. Click on.
Yeah, all our images for Micropasts are CC BY, so Creative Commons by attribution, which is generally a non-commercial usage, but yeah, if so it's non-commercial, but you can use it for any other purposes, so you can put it in your own research if you wanted. The only thing now that is, and I'm sure you guys have, this must be a huge problem for you, there is some new EU regulation which affects the museum as well as I think every research institution really, which says once you make something open access, at whatever level, it has to stay at that level. So, and I mean, in a way, the museum's quite keen, and the EU, to be honest, to make things as open as possible, especially because a lot of this research funding does come through sort of government, councils, so it should be open to the public. But it's just then negotiating that sometimes between all the various parties, and we have the same issue where there's British Museum Images who would happily sell you, including to the curators of the British Museum, will sell you an image for an article. So it's a little bit of a tricky territory, but we've sort of sidelined it by putting everything under our own sort of Flickr page and our own website, because the ethos for us was that it should be accessible, and we don't need to control the images, really. Yeah, that's true.
So, gracias a todos por venir. Continuamos con las preguntas, que tenemos un vino y unas cervecitas frescas esperándonos fuera. Como he dicho antes, no os preocupéis por el inglés, podéis encontrar a cualquiera de nuestro equipo y podemos hacer las preguntas y hacer de traductores mientras comemos algo. Así, muchas gracias por venir. Gracias de nuevo al Museo y a Factoría Cultural por haber habilitado este evento, a los speakers por haber venido, a Jennifer, a Chiara y a Nora por dar esta charla que yo creo que ha sido muy interesante. Muchas gracias.